It was a name whispered across encrypted chats, a face plastered across Crime Stoppers boards in cities he hadn't stepped foot in for years. Alex Mail, 32 years old, heavily tattooed, built like a cage fighter, and wanted by nearly every law enforcement agency in Britain. He wasn't a street dealer. He wasn't some small-time middleman. He was the one supplying the suppliers. By the summer of 2020, his network had moved more than 130 kilos of high-purity cocaine across the south of England. Weston-super-Mare, Bristol, Trowbridge, Portsmouth, the Midlands. He controlled it all. When police closed him back in 2020, they thought they had him. He was arrested, bailed, and then vanished. For the next 4 years, Alex Mail slipped through borders, lived under aliases, and mocked his pursuers from abroad. He posted holiday snaps from sun-drenched coastlines. He partied in Marbella. He was seen speeding in a Porsche. He even left anonymous taunts on his own most wanted notice board. You'll never find him. But he was wrong, because while he flaunted luxury on the surface, the walls were already closing in behind the scenes. Encrypted chats weren't as secure as they'd promised. Old allies were arrested, and little by little, the net drew tighter. What followed was one of the most relentless fugitive hunts in recent British crime history. A manhunt that spanned half a continent, involved multiple arrests, and ended in a roach-infested prison cell thousands of miles from home. This is the story of how Britain's most wanted drug boss evaded capture for years, and how it all came crashing down. Before he was Britain's most wanted, Alex Mail lived in plain sight. Weston-super-Mare, a seaside town known more for its arcades and beach huts than drug empires, was the unlikely base of operations for a man who quietly ran one of the Southwest's most powerful supply chains. Mail wasn't flashy on the surface, but behind the scenes, he was moving serious weight, over 130 kilos of high-purity cocaine and tens of thousands of pounds worth of ketamine. He wasn't just dealing, he was distributing to dealers. From Dorset to Wiltshire, Bristol to Bridgewater, his drugs were the ones fueling entire networks. And unlike the street-level runners taking the daily risk, Mail kept his hands clean. He used encrypted phones, layered communication, and stayed well away from the actual product. But staying distant didn't make him invisible. His name appeared in Operation Venetic, the UK's response to cracking the encrypted messaging system EncroChat, once thought to be untraceable. Mail had two handles, Original Dagger and Ragnar.com. Among those in the trade, he was known as the Viking, the one at the top of the pyramid. His buyers talked in kilos. His profits were counted in hundreds of thousands, sometimes collected in a single day. And every move he made was about control, efficiency, power. But like so many who rise too far too fast, Mail believed he was untouchable. And that belief would soon lead him to make a critical mistake. For years, encrypted phones gave criminals a false sense of security. EncroChat was the gold standard, a secretive network of encrypted handsets, costing thousands of pounds a year, promising complete privacy. No traceable numbers, no recoverable messages. For dealers like Alex Mail, it was the backbone of business. And then in one quiet moment, it all fell apart. Unbeknownst to its users, European authorities, led by French and Dutch agencies, had hacked EncroChat. They didn't just shut it down, they cloned it. For weeks, they watched messages flow in real time, from orders to drop-offs, prices to payment plans, Nothing was private anymore. When the Southwest Regional Organized Crime Unit tapped into those leaks, they didn't just find messages. They found structure, scale, and coordination. And sitting right at the center, behind the handles, Original Dagger and Ragnar.com, was Alex Mail. He shared photos of cocaine blocks with handwritten price tags. And he managed 2 criminal operations, one pushing cocaine and ketamine through a chain of trusted dealers, and another laundering the proceeds behind the scenes. And by June 2020, police had enough to make their move. Mail was arrested leaving a gym in Weston-super-Mare. But what happened next caught everyone off guard, even the police. Alex Mail should have been exactly where the law wanted him, behind bars. But in late 2020, as court delays and investigations dragged on, a critical lapse allowed him to walk free. Released on bail, he was placed under investigation. No tag, no curfew, no restrictions, and soon after, he vanished. It began quietly. A few missed check-ins, a phone that no longer rang. By the time officers moved to tighten conditions, Mail was gone, smuggled across the English Channel by boat to the Netherlands. From Eindhoven to Marbella, he blended in with other fugitives living in plain sight. In public, he flaunted the life of a man untouchable, posting photos from exotic destinations surrounded by wealth. Behind the scenes, he used forged documents and criminal contacts to stay one step ahead. In Spain, he was pulled over for speeding, driving a Porsche Panamera. A fake license and matching passport were enough to get bail. And once again, he vanished before they could react. Then came Portugal. Mail settled in the resort town of Vila Moura, sharing a flat with another of Britain's most wanted absconder. And when that fugitive was arrested, Mail disappeared again, this time to Turkey. But Istanbul airport brought his luck crashing down. Biometric checks flagged a mismatch. His forged passport failed. He was detained and put straight onto a flight back to Lisbon. British officers thought this was it, but Mail had one final move. Crafty and calculating, he agreed to extradition, knowing Portugal's legal clock was ticking. By law, a suspect can only be held for 150 days while awaiting deportation. As the countdown ran out, his lawyer, Ricardo Alvarez Osorio, known in Spain as the lawyer of the devil, filed appeal after appeal. When the final day came, Britain made a desperate plea to charge him with passport fraud. But Portugal's Supreme Court said no. Justice Enrique Luis de Brito de Araujo ordered Mail's release, with a condition: sign-in at a local police station. He walked out smiling. Outside the court, he posed for a photo, another trophy for his growing collection. Then he celebrated with lunch at one of Lisbon's finest restaurants. Within a week, he was gone again. This time, across continents. Smuggled by Russian gangsters, Mail was ferried over the Strait of Gibraltar and into Morocco. By the start of 2023, Alex Mail was no longer just a wanted man. He had become a name that travelled across borders, whispered in police briefings and printed on most wanted posters. After narrowly escaping the grip of justice in Portugal, he resurfaced in North Africa. This time, he settled in Marrakesh, Morocco. He lived quietly in a residential area, far from the scenes of luxury. Despite the reduced profile, Mail didn't abandon the comforts entirely. He kept a fake passport close at hand and lived with 3 stray kittens he had adopted. For a brief moment, it seemed like he might have found a new place to disappear. But the quiet was deceptive. What Mail didn't realize was that Moroccan authorities had already begun to track him. For 2 weeks, their intelligence officers kept him under surveillance. They monitored his movements, studied his routines, and gathered evidence quietly. The operation was coordinated in partnership with the National Crime Agency in the UK, who had continued to share intelligence behind the scenes. On the 21st of January 2023, the net finally closed. Police moved in without drama. There was no chase, no confrontation, just a clean, coordinated arrest. Mail was taken into custody and transferred to Tiflis prison, one of Morocco's most secure detention facilities. There, he was held under tight restrictions while the UK began formal extradition proceedings. The conditions inside the prison were far removed from the life Mail had grown used to. Later, he would describe the place in bleak detail: infestations, barely any hot water, and concrete floors instead of comfort. But there was no escape this time and no legal loophole to climb through. The extradition process took several months, but eventually all paperwork was finalized. In August 2023, Alex Mail was flown back to the UK in handcuffs, escorted by British officers and taken directly to HMP Exeter. After more than 3 years on the run and 4 separate international arrests, Britain's most elusive absconder was finally behind bars. And this time, there would be no escape. Back on British soil, Alex Mail's long-delayed reckoning had finally arrived. After years of tracking, fleeing and stalling, the justice system moved swiftly. His trial was held at Exeter Crown Court, the same city where his criminal empire had funneled millions in cocaine and ketamine just a few years earlier. In the dock stood a man who had once orchestrated logistics across half of England. Prosecutors laid out the scale of his operations in painstaking detail. Between March and June 2020 alone, Mail had overseen the movement of at least 130 kilograms of high-purity cocaine, the estimated street value more than £4.5 million. He also purchased ketamine in bulk, including a documented deal worth £26,600. At the same time, he managed the laundering of hundreds of thousands in criminal profits. The court heard how he once collected £600,000 in a single day. The evidence didn't stop at data. Witness testimony, seized devices, cash trails, and intercepted messages made the picture crystal clear. In one exchange, Mail casually negotiated a £37,500 purchase of cocaine, attaching a photo of a kilo block and receiving the reply, "Looks banging." It wasn't just business, it was arrogance. The prosecution also detailed his escape route along the way. He used a string of false identities and forged passports. In court, defense counsel did not challenge the conspiracy charges. Instead, he entered guilty pleas to conspiracy to supply both cocaine and ketamine, along with money laundering. Charges related to firearms were left on file. The judge described him as the person supplying the suppliers, not just another link in the chain, but the one pulling the strings. His co-conspirators had already received sentences totaling over 56 years. On the 2nd of December 2023, Alex Mail was sentenced to 18 years in prison. Mail's fall was complete. Alex Mail's story isn't just about drugs or the chase. It's about how, no matter how far you run, the past always catches up. And justice, it never stops moving. If you found this case as gripping as we did, like the video, subscribe for more true crime investigations from across the UK, and tell us in the comments, Do you think absconders like Mail should face even tougher sentences for running? Your thoughts help us tell more stories that matter.